The house was too quiet. That was the first thing I noticed after the funeral. For 30 years, I had woken up to the sound of John's coffee brewing, his soft humming as he read the paper. Now there was nothing, just silence. I was a widow, and I was lost. Everyone tells you grief is a storm, but no one tells you what it's like to sit in the wreckage after the storm passes, when the calls stop, the casseroles dry up, and the people who promised to check in fade back to their own lives. Everyone except Susan. Susan was my best friend. For 3 decades, she was like a sister to me. She was the one who drove me to the hospital that last night. She held my hand as the machines beeped their final notes. She answered my phone when I couldn't bear to. She planned a funeral service. She even made sure there was food on the table when I couldn't remember how to cook. She was my rock, or at least I thought she was. In those first few weeks, I let her handle everything. Bills, mail, paperwork. She insisted, "Mary, you shouldn't have to worry about these little things right now." And I believed her. I didn't want to worry. I didn't want to face reality. I just wanted to hide under the covers and sleep until the world made sense again. But grief has a way of forcing you awake. It happened one morning when the first bill came due, the mortgage. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper, my chest tight. John had always handled the finances. We had a joint account, and I knew there was enough there. We had saved all our lives, nearly $150,000, enough to keep me safe, enough to buy me time. My hands shook as I opened my laptop and logged in. It was the first time I'd looked at our account since John died. The page took forever to load. My heart was pounding in my ears. And then the numbers appeared. Not 6 figures, not even close. The balance was $847.32. I blinked, refreshed the page, blinked again. $847. Where was the rest of it? For a moment, I thought maybe it was a glitch, a technical issue. Maybe I was looking at the wrong account. But no, my name was there, John's name was there, and the number was still the same, $847.32. That's when my stomach dropped. The room tilted. The floor felt like it disappeared beneath me. Because if the money wasn't there, then where did it go? And why did I suddenly feel like I wasn't as alone in this as I thought? Before I continue, tell me, where are you watching this from? It's always amazing to see the different places people are listening. The morning after I saw that empty account, I didn't sleep. I sat in my robe at the kitchen table. The glow of the laptop still burned into my eyes. $800. That couldn't be right. My first instinct was to call Susan. She had been handling everything. She had my passwords, my checkbook, even the spare keys to my car. She was the one person I still trusted enough to lean on. My fingers shook as I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Mary, honey, are you okay? You sound like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard. My voice cracked. "Susan, the account. The money's gone. It's all gone. I logged in this morning and there's less than $1,000. Where is it? What happened?" There was a pause, just long enough to freeze my blood, and then her tone softened, warm, steady like a mother shushing a crying child. "Oh, sweetheart, of course, I moved it." My stomach lurched. "Moved it? Moved it where?" She laughed lightly, like I was being silly. "Mary, you can't be too careful after a death. You know how scams and fraud run wild when people see an obituary. Hackers, fake calls, phishing. It's everywhere.
I transferred everything into a money market account for safety. You don't need to worry. I have all the paperwork." Her voice was so confident, so matter-of-fact, that I felt ashamed for doubting her. Of course she had thought ahead. Of course she was protecting me. She had always been the practical one, the organized one, the detail person. Tears of relief burned my eyes. "Oh, thank God, Susan. I thought it was gone forever." No, she soothed. "You're fine. I was going to tell you this afternoon anyway. I'll bring the papers by and you'll see." When we hung up, I collapsed back into my chair. I felt like a fool for panicking. That was Susan, stepping in when I fell apart, making sure everything stayed in order. I told myself I didn't deserve a friend like her. Later that day, she arrived at my door with a manila folder. Inside were neatly typed forms, letterheads I didn't recognize, and long strings of financial jargon that made my eyes blur. Money market account, transfer authorization, beneficiary notation. I couldn't make sense of half of it, but she explained, slowly, patiently, like a teacher. And in my fragile state, I nodded along. "I'll just keep managing it for you until you feel ready," she said, resting her hand on mine. And I let her, because I wanted to believe, because I couldn't handle one more crack in the world beneath my feet. For a week, I let myself exhale. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, even treated myself to takeout for the first time in months. Life was still broken, but it felt like the pieces might settle. Then came the envelope. It was small, white, official-looking. I opened it at the kitchen counter, expecting a receipt or maybe a statement from the new account Susan had set up. Instead, my eyes locked on to the words, "Notice of wire transfer." My breath caught. I scanned the details. The date was circled in red by my mind, the day John died. But he had been unconscious that day. Tubes, machines, monitors. He couldn't sign his own name, let alone authorize a wire transfer. My hand shook so violently, I nearly dropped the letter. The bank claimed the authorization had come from John himself, but that wasn't possible. My heart was pounding as loud as the clock on the wall. If John hadn't authorized it, then who had?
I couldn't stop staring at that letter. A wire transfer. A huge one. And the date? It was the day before John died. I whispered out loud, like saying it might make it make sense. But he was unconscious. He couldn't have signed anything. He couldn't have... I grabbed the phone again, ready to call Susan, demand answers. But something in me froze. A tiny voice in the back of my mind said, "Don't. Not yet." Instead, I dug. John had always been meticulous, almost obsessive about his records. Every receipt, every note, every password, he treated it all like treasure. Somewhere, I knew there had to be a clue. I tore through his desk drawers, the filing cabinet, even the boxes in the closet. For hours I searched. Nothing. And then I remembered his old briefcase, the brown leather one he carried to work for 20 years. It was dusty, shoved behind winter coats in the hall closet. I pulled it out, set it on the bed, and popped the latches. Inside, tucked behind an old family photo, was a tiny brass key. Attached was a tag, written in John's neat handwriting, "Safety Deposit Box." My chest tightened. My hands shook as I drove to the bank. When the clerk slid the box across the counter, I swear my legs almost gave out. Inside was a small black ledger. John's handwriting covered every page, neat, precise, careful. Every account number, every password, every investment.
He had cataloged his entire financial life in this one book. And now it was mine to read. I flipped through, my finger trailing down the page until I found the account Susan claimed she'd moved the money into, the so-called safe money market account. It existed, but the balance was 0. I felt the air leave my lungs as I scanned the transaction history. There was only one entry, a single transfer out, the day after Susan supposedly moved the funds. My eyes darted to the recipient account. For a moment, I thought maybe it would be some random number, some offshore name I didn't know. But then I saw it, clear as day. Recipient? Susan F. Delaney. I dropped the book. My hands flew to my mouth. It wasn't for safety. It wasn't for me. It was for her. My best friend, my rock, my sister in all but blood. She had stolen every penny. I sat on the edge of the bed, the ledger sliding to the floor. My whole body shook. The house felt like it was closing in, walls pressing tight, the silence roaring louder than thunder. And one question echoed in my head over and over like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. How did she even do it? How did she get access to take everything? I couldn't breathe. The ledger lay on the floor, John's neat handwriting staring up at me like an accusation. Susan. Her full name printed right there as the recipient. My best friend, the woman who held me through the funeral, who made me tea when I couldn't eat, who told me to trust her with the details. She hadn't protected me. She had gutted me. But the question still burned. How? How did she even get access? She wasn't family. She wasn't a beneficiary. She wasn't on the account. So how could she have moved everything in her own name? The next morning, I marched into the bank, clutching John's ledger like a weapon. The manager, a kind man with graying hair, sat me down in a private office. His voice was low, careful. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but according to our records, your husband signed a document authorizing Susan Delaney as his durable power of attorney." I blinked at him, stunned. Power of what? That can't be right. He never told me anything about that. The manager slid a copy of the document across the desk. There it was, John's signature, naming Susan as his agent, giving her full control. It felt like my heart had been ripped out a second time. He would never give her that kind of power. I whispered. The manager sighed. It's not unusual for people facing illness to appoint a trusted friend, someone they think can handle the details. I know this must be hard to process. I left the bank in a fog, the paper clutched in my hand. At home, I spread it on the kitchen table and stared at John's signature. I knew every loop of his handwriting, every tiny imperfection. This didn't look right. The letters were too neat, too steady. John had been barely able to hold a pen in those final days. His hands shook from the medication. His grip was weak. But this signature, it was perfect. Too perfect. My stomach churned. I thought back to that final week. John, pale and fading in the hospital bed, his eyelids heavy, his hand limp in mine. He couldn't even hold a cup of water, let alone scrawl his name on a legal document. That's when the sickening thought hit me. What if he didn't sign it at all? I couldn't shake the idea. My lawyer recommended a forensic handwriting examiner. I handed over the document, my palms slick with sweat. He studied it under a magnifying glass, then placed it under a special light. He didn't say a word for a long time. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were sharp, certain. "This signature," he said slowly, "is a forgery, and not even a very good one." The words felt like a hammer blow. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Susan had forged it. But then the examiner pointed to the bottom of the page, to a small rectangular stamp I had barely noticed. "See this? The notary seal. A forgery is one thing, but this makes it official in the eyes of the bank. Whoever notarized this document, they're the key." I leaned in. My eyes landed on the name beneath the stamp, a name I didn't recognize. Eleanor Briggs. Who was Eleanor Briggs? And why did her name feel like the next piece of a puzzle I wasn't ready to solve? The name stared back at me from the bottom of that paper. Eleanor Briggs. It meant nothing to me. Not a neighbor, not anyone from John's office, not someone I'd ever met at church or the grocery store, just a name. I took it to my lawyer, hoping he would tell me it was a mistake, that the notary was some neutral stranger who had just done her job. But when he pulled up the records, his face went pale. "Mary," he said carefully, "Eleanor Briggs isn't just anyone. She's Susan's cousin." My throat dried. My head started spinning. It wasn't just Susan. She hadn't pulled this off alone. She had help. Family help. Someone willing to stamp a legal document and look the other way. This wasn't a favor. This was a conspiracy. For the first time since John died, my grief was shoved aside by something hotter, sharper. Rage. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft dressed up as legality. This was my best friend weaving a web around me while I was too blinded by loss to see it. My lawyer filed a civil suit. He alerted the district attorney's office. But even as the legal wheels began to turn, I couldn't stop thinking about Susan, about how she had smiled at me across the kitchen table, how she had handed me that folder with her calm, soothing voice. And I realized I needed to hear her say it out loud. So I made a plan. Every week since John died, Susan and I met for coffee, a little ritual she insisted on to make sure I was eating. This time, I walked in with a wire tucked beneath my blouse, the police listening just a few blocks away. Susan greeted me with her usual bright smile, sliding a muffin across the table like nothing had changed. "Blueberry, your favorite. Thought you could use a treat." I forced a smile back, though my hands trembled as I wrapped them around my coffee cup. For a long moment, I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch. Then finally, I asked the question that had been rotting inside me. "Susan, why did you do it?" Her face didn't fall. Her voice didn't stumble. The mask didn't slip. It shattered. She leaned in close, her eyes cold, her voice low, sharp as glass. "You had the perfect life, Mary, the perfect husband. Everyone loved you. And me, I was always cleaning up your messes. I cooked when you didn't. I stayed when you broke down. I kept you together for years. You think I was just going to watch you sail into retirement with all that money while I got nothing?" Her lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. I deserved it. I sat there, my heart pounding, every word burning itself into the recorder beneath my blouse. The best friend I thought I had was gone. In her place sat a stranger who thought betrayal was a birthright. But the worst part wasn't her anger, It was the way she said it. Not ashamed, not apologetic, just certain. As if in her twisted mind, she was owed my life. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. You always thought you were perfect, but you weren't. You made messes, Mary, and I was the one who cleaned them up. I stared at her, my mouth dry. What messes are you talking about?
Her words hit me like a slap. You always thought you were perfect, but you weren't. You made messes, Mary, and I was the one who cleaned them up. I could barely swallow. My voice trembled. Messes? What are you talking about? Susan leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and for the first time in 30 years of friendship, looked at me not with kindness, not with sisterhood, but with disdain. Do you remember your anniversary party? When you forgot to order the cake and everyone was about to walk out? Who drove across town to fix it? Me. Or the time your son's car broke down on prom night? Who went out in the rain, in heels, to get him home? Me. Or how many times, Mary, how many times did you cry on my shoulder while John worked those late nights and I had to convince you not to leave him? Her voice sharpened with each word, spitting them out like bullets. In your little memory, I was your best friend. But in mine, I was your maid, your babysitter, your therapist, your unpaid servant. And don't even get me started on the times I picked up the check because you'd forgotten your wallet. I sat frozen. Each memory she listed. Yes, they'd happened, but twisted, distorted. To her, they weren't small acts of kindness between friends. They were debts, tally marks on some invisible ledger I never knew existed. And now, in her mind, she was collecting. The wire in my blouse caught every poisonous syllable. And for the first time in 30 years of friendship, I felt something new. Not grief, not rage, but pity. She wasn't just a thief. She was broken. A woman who had turned friendship into a transaction, who saw loyalty as currency, who believed betrayal was justice. But pity doesn't pay bills. Pity doesn't put back $150,000. The recording was gold for the prosecution. Motive, intent, confession, all neatly packaged over a blueberry muffin. For the first time, I felt like the tide was turning. Until the next week, when Susan's lawyer made his move. In court, he stood tall and smug, waving a piece of paper. Your Honor, this wire transfer was not theft. It was a gift. A generous, intentional gift from Mr. Carter to Miss Delaney in gratitude for her years of loyalty and friendship. I nearly choked. A gift? My husband, who had told me again and again that our savings were for my future, for our family? But then the lawyer dropped the hammer. And here, Your Honor, is proof. A handwritten note from Mr. Carter himself. The judge leaned forward. The bailiff passed it to my lawyer. I craned my neck to see. The words leapt off the page in John's handwriting, or something close to it. To my dear friend Susan, please accept this gift as thanks for all you've done for Mary and me over the years. You've been our rock. Use it well. Signed,
John Carter. My head spun. It looked like John's handwriting, his looping J, his careful C, but something about it felt off, forced, like someone had studied his notes and copied them just well enough to fool an untrained eye. The judge's brow furrowed, but his words chilled me to the bone. Mrs. Carter, the burden will be on you to prove this note is fraudulent. If you cannot, the defense's claim of a gift may stand. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. All the recordings, all the rage, all the betrayal, none of it mattered if this single piece of paper was accepted as truth. If I couldn't prove it was fake, Susan might walk free.